Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction. These regimes pose a grave and growing danger. They could provide these arms to terrorists, giving them the means to match their hatred. They could attack our allies or attempt to blackmail the United States. In any of these cases, the price of indifference would be catastrophic. We'll be deliberate, yet time is not on our side. I will not wait on events while dangers gather. I will not stand by as peril draws closer and closer. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons.
He was suggesting it would be military action as opposed to something else.
He said exactly what he said. He said it well. He didn't suggest anything. If there was anything about last night's speech, it was that it had near perfect clarity.
But a senior administration official after the speech said he didn't necessarily mean to say military action, but it could be other action.
What do you mean necessarily mean to say? He didn't say. He not only didn't necessarily say, he did not say. He said exactly what he said.
He seemed to suggest, and therefore perhaps it isn't that clear. You see, it's perfect clarity. It isn't clear, is it?
Oh, I think it is.
The best in some cases, the only defense is a good offense. Now that's a major change of U.S. defense policy, is it not? Have we ever taken a preemptory strike against another country without them first attacking us?
If you think about it, we have no choice. A terrorist can attack at any time, at any place, using a range of techniques. It is physically impossible to defend at every time, in every location, against every conceivable technique of terrorism. Therefore, if your goal is to stop it, you cannot stop it by defense. You can only stop it by taking the battle to the terrorists where they are and going after them.
You said we have a lot of allies out there, but I haven't noticed any of the Arab states supporting strong action against Iraq. They seem to want diplomacy to be given a chance. What kind of response did you get?
Well, I think, I guess the way I would characterize it is that they are uniformly concerned about the situation in Iraq, in particular about Saddam Hussein's failure to live up to the UN Security Council resolutions that said he'd get rid of all of his weapons of mass destruction.
I think one other point that the Vice President made, which is a good point, is that this is an administration that when we say we're going to do something, we mean it. That we are resolved to fight the war on terror. This isn't a short-term strategy for us. That we understand history has called us in action, and we're not going to miss this opportunity to make the world more peaceful and more free.
Weapons of mass destruction, but did not share the U.S. desire to get rid of Saddam Hussein, said it would cause instability in the region. How do you read that?
I would not expect Saddam's neighbors to be the first people to raise their hands to say, you've got to take tough action against them. I think they look to the United States to lead, and I think the President is leading very clearly.
The United States should not preemptively attack Iraq to take out any weapons of mass destruction. Reports from your trip around the Middle East that Arab country after Arab country said to you, don't do that, Mr. Vice President. Don't you dare attack Iraq.
That's not the way that I would describe, first of all, their opinions. I had private, confidential meetings at nearly every stop. And those meetings obviously were and need to remain confidential. They're all very concerned about Iraq. They live in the neighborhood. They know Saddam Hussein better than we do. Many of them know that right after us, they're high on his list of governments he'd like to do in. What I came away with, Bob, is the sense that they share our concern.
I asked that because the public reaction was, if one just read what those leaders said in public, it was, we're unified against any kind of action against Saddam Hussein. Is that a correct interpretation of the public reactions?
It was mixed, I think, in terms of their public reactions.
On your most recent trip to the region, most of the moderate Arab leaders with whom you met were not very enthusiastic about a U.S. strike against Iraq. King Abdullah of Jordan said to attack Baghdad now would be a disaster. Crown Prince Abdullah said, I do not believe it is in the United States' interests or the interest of the region or the world's interest to do so.
What I would say is that our friends in the region are equally concerned about the problems we see in Iraq, specifically the development of weapons of mass destruction by Saddam Hussein. This is a man of great evil, as the president said, and he is actively pursuing nuclear weapons at this time, and we think that's cause for concern for us and for everybody in the region. And I found during the course of my travels that it is indeed a problem of great concern.
Were to go into Iraq to remove Saddam Hussein, militarily it would be a cakewalk. Is that the view here at the Pentagon?
When we put our young sons and daughters of this country in harm's way, I don't think you can ever call that a cakewalk. Well, what we know is that the situation since Desert Storm and today has changed dramatically, both for U.S. and coalition forces and for Iraqi forces. The Iraqi armed forces is about 40% in terms of numbers of what it was in the Gulf War.
Anticipate a September 11th and prevent it. Although if we'd gone to war against Afghanistan before September 11th, people would have said we had no justification. We can't wait for a nuclear or chemical or biological attack to go and find the people who did it.
Is it fair to say Saddam Hussein's days are numbered?
I would hope so.
Is it fair to say so?
I think so.
For another U.S. military strike at Iraq with the aim of regime change or getting rid of Saddam Hussein, can you go it alone?
I'm not going to get into that. You can be sure the United States isn't going to do anything that it's not capable of doing, and if we do something, we'll be capable of doing it. But it's not for me to make those judgments.
You saw the story in today's USA Today on the front page, suggesting that your military chiefs are not enthusiastic about going after Iraq right now, that the military might be stretched too thin already in Afghanistan.
I meet with those folks all the time. I have no reason to give credence to that.
But new threats also require new thinking. Containment is not possible when unbalanced dictators with weapons of mass destruction can deliver those weapons on missiles or secretly provide them to terrorist allies. We must take the battle to the enemy, disrupt his plans, and confront the worst threats before they emerge. In the world we have entered, the only path to safety is the path of action, and this nation will act.
Yesterday that Iraq has no weapons of mass destruction and is not developing any.
They're lying. Next.
To get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. I know it's unlikely that you'll share any details with us, though we'd be delighted to hear them, sir.
Somebody else thinks they are.
But I wonder, Mr. President, regardless of when or how, is it your firm intention to get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq?
Yes.
And how hard do you think it will be?
It's the stated policy of this government to have regime change, and it hasn't changed. And we'll use all tools at our disposal to do so.
The Persian Gulf War ended by saying he would allow for unfettered inspection by international inspectors and does not keep his word. That's a real cause of concern for the United States and for the United Nations.
Concern, but is it a cause to go to war and kill a lot of people?
I'm not going to speculate about what the future may or may not hold.
Is in any way hosting, supporting, sponsoring Al-Qaeda or any other terrorists inside Iraq?
Well, I suppose at some moment it may make sense to discuss that publicly, and it doesn't today. But what I have said is a fact, that there are Al-Qaeda in a number of locations in Iraq, and the suggestion that those people who are so attentive in denying human rights to their population aren't aware of where these folks are or what they're doing is ludicrous.
Russia, Germany, Bahrain, now Canada, who say that if you go to war with Saddam, you're going to go alone. Does the American military have the capability to prosecute this war alone?
If you're asking, are you asking about Iraq? That the subject didn't come up in this meeting, but having said that, We take all threats seriously, and we will continue to consult with our friends and allies. I know there's this kind of intense speculation that seems to be going on, a kind of a, I don't know how you would describe it. It's kind of a churning.
Frenzy.
Frenzy is how the Secretary would describe it. But the subject didn't come up. The American people know my position, and that we will look at all options and we will consider all technologies available to us, and diplomacy and intelligence. But one thing is for certain is that this administration agrees that Saddam Hussein is a threat
to the true ambitions of the global terror network, and to the reality that weapons of mass destruction are being sought by determined enemies who would not hesitate to use them against us. Under the Bush Doctrine, a regime that harbors or supports terrorists will be regarded as hostile to the United States. As President Bush has said, time is not on our side. Saddam has perfected the game of cheat and retreat and is very skilled in the art of denial and deception. A return of inspectors would provide no assurance whatsoever of his compliance with UN resolutions. On the contrary, there is a great danger that it would provide false comfort that Saddam was somehow back in his box. Armed with an arsenal of these weapons of terror and seated atop 10% of the world's oil reserves, Saddam Hussein could then be expected to seek domination of the entire Middle East and subject the United States or any other nation to nuclear blackmail. Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us. The Middle East expert, Professor Fuad Ajami, predicts that after liberation, the streets in Basra and Baghdad are sure to erupt in joy in the same way throngs in Kabul greeted the Americans.
He said inspection was actually dangerous because it would create a false sense of comfort. So which is it? Do we believe that inspection should go forward even though they are dangerous? Or are we supposed to believe that they are dangerous and therefore they shouldn't go forward?
Well, the history of the inspections when they took place did lead to a lot of question marks. That's why I said that inspections in and of themselves, inspectors in and of themselves, are not a guarantee that Saddam Hussein is not developing weapons of mass destruction.
Does the president think inspectors should go into Iraq or not?
The president does.
If Saddam does allow those inspectors in, does he avoid regime change?
The policy of the United States is regime change, with or without inspectors.
Tariq Aziz said this morning, he characterized you and several other people in the Bush administration as warmongers, as using the issue of inspections as a pretext to try to topple the regime. And he said he is willing to sit down and talk about all of the issues involving Iraq.
Well, I've met with Tariq Aziz a number of times, both in Baghdad and in Washington and elsewhere. Clearly he does the bidding of his master, Saddam Hussein. They have, over a good many years, demonstrated wonderful talent and skill at manipulating the media and international organizations and other countries. When it's the right moment to lean forward, they lean forward. When it's the right moment to lean back, they lean back. And it's a dance. It's a dance they engage in.
The threat from Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, potentially nuclear weapons capability, that threat is real. We only need to look at the report from the International Atomic Energy Agency this morning, showing what has been going on at the former nuclear weapons sites to realize that. And the policy of inaction is not a policy we can responsibly subscribe to.
We just heard the Prime Minister talk about the new report. I would remind you that when the inspectors first went into Iraq and were finally denied access, a report came out of the Atomic the IAEA, that they were 6 months away from developing a weapon. I don't know what more evidence we need.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein's regime is a danger to the United States and to its allies, to our interest. It is also a danger that is gathering momentum, and it simply makes no sense to wait any longer to do something about the threat that is posed here. As the President has said, the one option that we do not have is to do nothing.
The President has, I think, put it exactly right. He has said that the one choice we don't have is to do nothing.
As the President has said, and as Prime Minister Blair said yesterday, doing nothing is no longer an option.
He has aggressively sought to acquire chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons over the years.
This is a man who has attacked his neighbors twice, who represses his own people.
He used chemical weapons both against the Kurds and against the Iranians during the 1980s.
Who is continuing to develop weapons of mass destruction, has not disarmed.
He's launched ballistic missiles against 4 of his neighbors over the years.
Who's tried to assassinate a former American president, who pays $25,000 to Hamas bombers, by the way, some of whom blew up Hebrew University, and with it 5 Americans.
Before the Gulf War, back in 1990, we had reason to believe then that he had established a program to try to produce a nuclear weapon.
We went in and were able to find out that they were within 6 months to a year of having a nuclear weapon.
History shows that you are always surprised about how quickly someone acquires a terrible weapon. We were surprised that the Soviet program was as far along as it was. We thought it would be 1955, it was 1949.
We have to assume there's more there than we know. What we know is just bits and pieces we gather through the intelligence system, but nobody ever mails you the entire plan.
Our intelligence is always imperfect, and we usually find out that what we don't know is the most troublesome.
He now is trying, through his illicit procurement network, to acquire the equipment he needs to be able to enrich uranium.
Aluminum tubes.
Specifically aluminum tubes. There's a story in the New York Times this morning.
Reporting just this morning that he is still trying to acquire, for example, some of the specialized aluminum tubing one needs to develop centrifuges that would give you an enrichment capability.
Scott Ritter, a former United Nations weapons inspector, today addressed the Iraqi National Assembly and basically made the point that there are no problems as far as Iraq is concerned. Listen specifically to what he said.
The rhetoric of fear that is disseminated by my government and others has not to date been backed up by hard facts that substantiate any allegations that Iraq is today in possession of weapons of mass destruction or has links to terror groups responsible for attacking the United States.
We have facts, not speculation. Scott is certainly entitled to his opinion, but I'm afraid that I would not place the security of my nation and the security of our friends in the region on that kind of an assertion by somebody who's not in the intelligence chain any longer.
Is there any hard evidence directly linking the Iraqi government to al-Qaeda and the 9/11 terror attacks against the United States?
There is certainly evidence that al-Qaeda people have been in Iraq.
We've seen in connection with the hijackers, of course, Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker, did apparently travel to Prague on a number of occasions. And on at least one occasion, we have reporting that places him in Prague with a senior Iraqi intelligence official a few months before the attack on the World Trade Center.
It's just more of a picture that is emerging, that there may well have been contacts between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein's regime. There are others, and we will be laying out the case.
Again, I want to separate out 9/11 from the other relationships between Iraq and the al-Qaeda organization. But there is a pattern of relationships going back many years.
One of the things we learned from September 11th was that the intent of the terrorists and those who would supply them with weapons of mass destruction is very, very clear. They're to wipe out our way of life.
The problem here is that there will always be some uncertainty about how quickly he can acquire a nuclear weapon. But we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.